Hey guys, I just thought I'd post a slideshow presentation to make sure that, for the people that prefer something a little bit more visual, as well as audio, I suppose, that you can really get the tenets of polarization emerging. Someone said that it's absolutely crux to understanding structuring of ranges and dissection of ranges and general adjustments in 2011 poker, and I absolutely agree with him. I think he said it in many fewer words, but nonetheless, it is pretty big in terms of poker theory right now. It's pretty important to understand, and a lot of the nightmare spots that you might, stay awake at night, sweating and nightmarish fevers about, it kind of gets solved. So it's definitely worth at least learning the definitions of, and maybe how to apply it just a little bit. So I just want to do a quick word about it, particularly focusing on pre-flop, but it does apply to flop, turn, and river play, though it's not solved by me at all, nor is it, is any of this actually my doing. This is all, just research. So, in my very humble opinion, in any application of this, which hasn't already been understood by the poker world and generally accepted. So merging is pretty simple. This is when you're betting the top X% of your range. So your opponent is probably just calling in this situation or rarely raising. This is usually what you're doing in all situations in live poker. There's no gap between the top of your range and a bluffing range. Everything's being bet in terms of a straight line in equity. I think it's better understood with a picture. This is a merged range, for example, a 3-bet merged range. So, for example, we are in the big blind, and the hijack opens. This might be a decent 3-betting range if we're expecting to get flatted wide. If our opponent's flatting with hands like Jack 9 suited and Jack 10 suited, we're going to have a lot of dominating hands where we're going to flop top pair, he's going to flop top pair, worst kicker, we're going to get a little bit of value sound out of him. So against someone who's not really raising much, this is a phenomenal range. He's going to call with a lot of worse hands, and we're going to get a ton of value. I did miss Ace-Jack offsuit and Ace-10 offsuit in the described example. I would definitely be 3-betting King-Queen, King-Jack, Ace-Jack, Ace-10. I think this was mostly focusing on the button versus maybe a middle position range, especially in live play against an aggressive opponent who's going to flat a lot of 3-bets out of position. But just for the pictorial example, it is the top X% of hands, or close to the top X% of hands. We're not purposely flatting hands in order to protect them. A polarized range, on the other hand, is going to come into handy when our opponent is more likely to raise us, or our opponent is folding exploitably and not calling very, too wide. So there's not much range to be had, or not much equity to be had with that middle range, because our opponent isn't going to call with worse hands. For example, if we 3-bet King-Jack, and our opponent is going to fold all worse kings and all worse jacks, but he's going to 4-bet all the hands like 9s and jacks and ace-king, so we can't continue after he 4-bets. We're never going to see a flop when we 3-bet, but if we flat, we have equity against his range. Then we want to be flatting those hands instead of 3-betting them and turning them into a bluff, because in that situation we might as well have Jack 3 offsuit. Because when we 3-bet Jack 3 offsuit, he either folds or he raises. If we 3-bet King-Jack, he either folds or he raises. In either case, our hand doesn't matter because we're just 3-bet folding. So it all depends on the fold equity, not in any way what we're holding, other than the fact that some hands might have combos, or might cut combos of what he could 4-bet with. For example, Ace-Deuce suited is a lot better than Jack 3 suited, just because our opponent is 4-betting aces, Ace-King, possibly Ace-Queen, so there's a lot less combos of those Ace-X hands in his range, because we have one of the aces. So this is an idea of a polarized range. In this situation, we can obviously flat Ace-Deuce suited plus profitably, otherwise we'd be 3-betting those hands. So just, again, a general visualization. I can't give you exact ranges in anything but a very specific example. and I'm not the person to tell you, the precise range with which you should 3-bet in terms of frequencies. But in this situation, we believe our opponent is stacking off, like for example, this would be great against a guy that's going to 4-bet hands like 9s through jacks, ace queen, ace jack. We're going to dominate his 4-betting range. We're going to have a ton of equity when he shoves. But he's also folding exploitably, so we're making a ton of money with these king deuce suited through king 7 suited and queen deuce suited through queen 7 suited hands. Just by fold equity. He's just going to fold the 3 big blinds that he raised pre-flop, and we are winning a bunch of money that way. So we're getting equity when we flat with all these hands that we were 3-betting before, all these jacks, 10s, king, jack. So these hands make us money because we're calling with them. These hands obviously always make us money because they have equity against this 5-bet range. And these hands make us money just via fold equity. So I would say the definition of a polarized range is 3 parts. It is, we're 3-betting with hands that have equity against our opponent's 5-betting range, and we are flatting with hands that have equity against our opponent's raising range, but not against his 5-betting range. And we are 3-betting hands that have no equity against our opponent's initial raising range, but do gain fold equity. We could also be 3-betting these hands for purely balance purposes, but that's a completely different discussion that we're going to stick away from right now. So against an opponent who's going to 4-bet a ton, 3-betting hands that don't have stack-off equity, or equity against his stack-off range, is a mistake, because we're just raise-folding them. Conversely, if our opponent is going to call a ton, it's pretty stupid to 3-bet king-deuce suited instead of king-jack. We might as well play a bloated pot with a hand that dominates his range. A very interesting note is that the ranges that I created purposely so that the frequency of our 3-bet is pretty much the same. I think it's within like 0.2% or something like that. So the 2 pictures that you saw, our opponents are probably going to believe are 2 identical ranges. However, they couldn't be more different, nor should you be playing against them in anything of a similar manner. So that's extraordinarily important in the sense that just calling, or just noticing someone's frequencies pre-flop is not nearly enough to know how to play against them. You need to go much deeper than that in 2011 poker theory, so you can't generalize like you used to be able to and still maintain the same profit. So when do I do either one of these things? Well, we already kind of went over that. If your opponent's going to be calling a bunch, you might as well raise with hands that beat him. If you don't have the fold equity, you can't really raise air much, so we should be merging. It's pretty intuitive, but just to go over it, if our opponent's going to raise a bunch and not call very often, then we don't want to turn hands that could flat or check with equity when they don't have equity after our opponent's action following our bet. So we're just betting a hand, turning it into a bluff, and relinquishing any equity that that hand had and replacing with fold equity. Instead, take a hand that didn't have equity and give it fold equity. I have an Excel document. If you visit my website, I'll try to post a link to it in the YouTube post. If you're getting this from my website, then kudos. It's called, I think it's called Poker Tool version 6.0 or something like that. It's on sheet 2. All you have to do is plug in your opponent's range for reaching a street, and then your opponent's range for raising, your opponent's range for calling, and it's generalized to very wide, medium, tight, very tight, and it's obviously extremely fallible. It's just a way to help you visualize. Don't consider it law by any means. I'm not good enough to tell you how you should play every street in every scenario of poker. Just some dude. So this is just to get the ball rolling, give you some ideas. And when we're facing a bet, this is going to help us because now we know what our opponent's range benefits from. So for example, if our opponent is thin value betting the turn, we're going to benefit a ton by turning the bottom of our value range into bluffs, because we can no longer profitably call with it because our opponent is betting mostly for value, and his value range dominates our hand. So we can turn it into a bluff and force him to fold an exploitable amount of his value range because he can no longer continue against our normal raising range. So either he's going to have to widen his stack off range, or he's going to have to start pot controlling those hands, on the turn. Conversely, if our opponent is merging his range, we benefit from hand equivalency. If our opponent is only betting the nuts or nothing, then everything in between the nuts and nothing is pretty much the same hand. If you beat nothing and lose to the nuts, that means you could have the second nuts, or something slightly better than nothing, so, be it bottom pair or whatever. Obviously, not everyone is going to be exact with their ranges. They might turn bottom pair into a bluff, and this is really important when judging just how far you can go with these concepts, the exactitude with which your opponent makes these adjustments. It's really deep, but and I certainly don't understand it fully, but it's something to think about, and it's a way to quickly adjust and level war with your opponent. So, it's just get the gears rolling, I guess. That's the end of the slideshow, and I hope this helped at least a couple people. Have a great one, guys.